So here we are, it's History Jam. Hello, Katie.
Hi, Leslie.
Have you got a question for me then, eh?
So, what actually is vaudeville?
Vaudeville.
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 Just talking musicals with you.
Okay, that's a good one. I've really sort of one from the past, but something everybody's always talked about. We associate it with America. Vaudeville. People talk about, oh yeah, they were in vaudeville. And it doesn't sound, it sounds more French, doesn't it, than an American word,
Vaudeville.
vaudeville. And actually, vaudeville um, comes from the expression voix de ville. So it comes from, the story goes that it originates from French urban folk song type things. So, and with all the migration that was going on during the 19th century, from Europe and elsewhere to New York to America, that you would get all the different cultures exchanging different kinds of entertainment. So you'd have burlesque, and you'd have minstrel shows, and melodramas, and variety. You also had sort of really kind of bawdy entertainments on the Bowery, which is a street that runs off of Broadway down through Manhattan.
Right.
And vaudeville comes from this French word for French urban folk songs. But there was a man in the late 1800s, his name was Tony Pastor. I think in about 1860, he had been working as a minstrel on the Bowery, and he also put on these sort of saloon type shows that were they were sometimes quite risque, and you'd get anybody could go and see them. And he decided that he was running these shows, um, that he was missing out on a large audience, because just generally men just would go and watch these shows in the Bowery. And so he decided to try and attract the bigger audience, which was to create something that was appropriate for all the family.
Okay.
And even though it was similar to the variety shows that were going on down the Bowery, they called it vaudeville. So it made it sound a little bit more elegant. And he started up this theatre, which I think his particular theatre, Tony Pastor's vaudeville theatre, I think it ran for about 25 years. It was just on Union Square. Um, uh, and on sort of in New York. And anybody could go there, and so it was fun for all the family. And the idea was that you'd have different entertainments. So you'd have singers, jugglers, comedians, you'd have little sketches, and it was known as vaudeville. And Tony Pastor is known as the father of vaudeville. And of course his family were migrants themselves, because his name was originally Antonio Pastore, but known as Tony Pastor. And eventually, vaudeville circuits sort of set up going around the whole of America. Now, he wasn't behind those, but people did very well out of that. And I think that eventually there were about 2,000 vaudeville theatres around America. Um, but he was responsible for employing some really well-known people. One that comes to mind is a lady called Lillian Russell, who became famous in vaudeville. And then there were the four Cohans, as they were known, the family of the Cohen family. And there was mother, father, daughter, and little boy, otherwise known as George M. Cohen, who actually went on to write "Give My Regards to
Okay.
Broadway." Vaudeville was sort of ran side by side with variety, but and they were very, very similar. But vaudeville, that's the origins of the name vaudeville. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That was lovely. Just for my own sake, what were the shows before. So you said that there were the variety performances running alongside the vaudeville performances, but they were just usually men were going to see them. Were they just beautiful ladies? Is this where the Ziegfeld girls came in? Beautiful
Oh no,
ladies
that
and
was
beautiful
something else.
actors?
You see, that's the wonderful thing about New York from well, the 18th century, 19th century. From the 18th century, you there was just this influx of different cultures coming across to America, and a lot of them settling on the East Coast, and so that you would have everybody brought their own style of entertainment. So you would have um, uh, French melodramas.
Mhm.
You'd have what was then known as burlesque, but it wasn't what we associate with burlesque. But it was an entertainment burlesque. Actually, I can't. Burlesque is a variety entertainment, but it's not about stripping. I know that. That's what I do know. Minstrel shows.
What
Um,
was a minstrel show?
a minstrel show was very, very popular, especially in the 19th century on Broadway. And of course, they gradually became less and less, uh, you know, politically, political correctness came in.
Oh, the only thing I know about minstrel shows is ringing some sort of racism bell in my head, but I don't really know what it is.
It's because the performers would take uh, traditional songs from African American culture,
Yeah,
from the well, which would have come across the songs that effectively slaves would have sung on the plantation, and traditional
right.
songs, and they would sing those popular songs,
Hmm.
uh, but they would be sung by white men with blacked up faces.
Ah,
And
that's
even
where
if
that
you,
came from.
yeah, and even if you were black, the style of the black was that you had to get even blacker.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
and yeah, so that and that was known as singing in blackface, and so that was minstrel shows, and you would have, but there was a particular style, and if I'm getting this wrong, people can correct me, but there was you'd have bones and tambo. Um, uh, would be part of your minstrel show, so you'd have these songs being performed, and bones would be drums,
Yeah,
and tambourine.
yeah.
So they would be essentially groups of people singing, putting on shows. They would be entertainments, and that was minstrel shows.
Okay. Dr.
And
Les.
pardon?
Thank you, Dr. Les.
Oh, my pleasure, Dr. Ridout. Um, but and the other ones, I mean, the other entertainments that you get on down on the Bowery, they were like your typical saloon bars. They were all a bit rough and ready. Um,
Mm,
and I was listening to something recently, and they were talking about how, um, for instance, if you could get checked for having your gun on you if you were going into a saloon, and particularly in vaudeville, if you were trying to get a single man trying to get into a vaudeville show, you'd actually have you'd be checked for any armory on you, and have your gun taken off of you, and
yeah.
there was no swearing allowed in vaudeville, whereas down in the saloon bars down the Bowery,
Yeah.
it was pretty much a free-for-all. Another wonderful thing about vaudeville in particular was that um, Union Square was where a lot of the publishers started up before they all moved a bit further up uh, Broadway to West 28th Street. And in the early days, that's where a lot of the music publishers were as well, just off Union Square. And um, the songs that were sung in vaudeville, they would sell those the sheet music for those songs in the foyer for just a couple of cents, and people could take the music home, learn the music, and that's how you'd get you'd make your sales, because this is before recorded music. And there was one particular song called After the Ball that was the first one to hit 1 million copies sold, and eventually it sold something like 10 million copies.
Wow.
This is just the start of how publishing and performance and entertainments, really, people were really hitting their stride.
Mm, very cool. So I think I derailed you because you were going to tell me why it was mostly just men down sort of at the Bowery and things. Was it because of the language, or was it the performances? Were they a bit more risque,
I
or?
think all of that, all of the above. Yeah. And the thing for Tony Pastor was that it was the whole thing that he knew that, you couldn't take your family there, you couldn't take children there, and that he could see that there was plenty of entertainment for anybody that just didn't care whether there was bad language and lots of alcohol being drunk and other bad behavior happening. So his idea was to create something that was fun for all the family. And of course, one of the nice things about vaudeville was that if they would say, if you're not enjoying it now, wait 5 minutes because we've got another act coming on that you
Yeah.
might like.
So he saw a gap in the market there, didn't he?
Yes. So anyway, that's it really.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Les.
Oh, my pleasure, Dr. Ridout.
Just talking musicals with you.